of the day, Ms. Radhika Sankhanam, who is an assistant editor at the Hindu newspaper. She also edits the editorial opinion pages and helps commission articles on various subjects. She also writes newsletters from the newspapers. She was also selected to go on a 3-month journalism fellowship to Germany in the year 2017, organized by the Bosch Foundation. She holds a master's degree in sociology and a diploma in journalism and an avid reader. We welcome you, ma'am. I also extend a warm welcome to our faculty members who have joined us to be a part of this webinar. My hearty welcome to all my friends from various departments who have enthusiastically come forward to participate in this webinar. I now request ma'am to take over the session.
Hi, thank you. Would you prefer me to be on video or can I just?
Ma'am, whatever is comfortable with you, you can go ahead, ma'am.
Okay. 1 second. Okay. Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for inviting me to speak at your college. I had the privilege of doing this a year or two ago. I think maybe it wasn't last year because last year we were all at home, but the year before that. And I think it was even more enriching to actually interact with the students. Then, unfortunately, today we are forced to do a webinar. But I do hope that you treat this as a session that is not a lecture, but something where we can all interact with each other. So feel free to, at any point, stop me, ask questions, and let's have an interactive discussion at the end of it. Because reading is something that we have to talk about. It's not something where I just want to lecture you saying what are the benefits of reading, okay? Okay, so firstly, I'm going to start this by talking a little about myself. So as you said, my name is Radhika, and I have been with the Hindu for the past 9 years. A lot of my work involves reading. So I commission articles for the editorial and opinion pages, which are the central pages of the newspaper, if all of you read newspapers. I hope you do. And a lot of what we do requires us to keep following the news because we ask people to write on certain subjects. So for example, if say the Supreme Court makes a judgment on privacy or on Sabrimala, then we try to get lawyers, women's rights activists, constitutional lawyers, sociologists, and so on to look at the case from different angles. So that obviously means that we ourselves have to read about it from different perspectives in order to ensure that our readers also get to know about the subject from different perspectives. That is why I think that reading is important. Now, the kind of reading that I'm talking about here is nonfiction, but of course there are different genres, and I'm going to get into that slowly. But besides my job, I'd like to go a little bit into my personal life. And the reason I'm doing that is because I feel my family has had a huge influence in the way I have been brought up, always been surrounded by books. So my grandfather lived in Bangalore. My mother grew up in a joint family, and my grandfather and my grandmother were in Bangalore. And my grandfather was a voracious reader. He had a thirst for knowledge that you seldom see with the generation today. So, and by that I mean he used to learn different languages, so much so that even when he was in his 70s, he had a Persian teacher come home to teach him Persian. And so by the end of his life, he had learned 16 languages. So he knew English, he knew Marathi, he knew Hindi, he knew Kannada, he knew Tamil. And of course, he knew other foreign languages. He knew French, he knew German, he knew Persian, he knew Latin. So it was, for him, it was always about learning. And I think that was something that I learned whenever I went to Bangalore for my holidays to meet my mom's extended family. The house would always be full of books. My grandfather read so much that over time he built such an enormous collection of books that at some point parts of the house had to just sort of be converted into a library. And because the books just kept piling up and piling up. And just a few years ago, of course, my grandfather passed away many years ago, but a few years ago, we realized that we just didn't know what to do with the books, so we donated them to a bunch of colleges. But My brother, again, was also a voracious reader. And because he spent even more time at my grandfather's house in Bangalore, my brother turned out to be just like my grandfather. He was, like a carbon copy of my grandfather, I would say. Because if my brother picks up a book today, he shuts himself from the rest of the world and he just sits and he reads and he reads. Today, he's a professor of computer science at Oxford. And even though his subject is computer science and theoretical mathematics, he's someone who's very interested in history and someone who's very interested in literature. And so his interests are very varied. And I think that is a large part due to my grandfather. And the same, my grandfather's daughter is my mother. And my mother, again, because of the kind of influence that my grandfather had, went on to do, her master's and her MPhil in literature, and also became a journalist. So the reason I'm saying this is only because I feel in a large way how much ever I read or whatever I do, I don't think I can ever be like my grandfather, but the attempt is always to try. And try not because there is an aim. It's not as though I want to say, oh, look at me, I have read 50 books this year. No, that's not the aim. The aim is to constantly know about the world around us, right? We can't be self-centered creatures just sitting here and not caring about what's going on around us. So books are a wonderful way of gaining knowledge about everything in the world. And also, when I talk about books, as I said earlier, it's not just about fiction. So if my mother is someone who's very interested in literature and history, so there are a lot of history and literature books around the house. But I'm not as an avid reader of history as she is. In fact, that way I take on a little bit after my father, because he's someone who's very interested in politics and he's very interested in diplomacy and current affairs. And since my job is the same, as in that's what I deal with on an everyday basis, those are the kinds of books that I often read also, to do with nonfiction. So of course, there are different kinds of books and genres. There's fiction, there's nonfiction, there's magazine writing, there are self-help books. There are a wide range of books. The problem nowadays is I think a lot of people feel certain books are better than other books. I think this is the greatest disservice we have done to reading, because when we are children, I think if and when we all, if you have children around your house, whether they're your own kids or they're kids who are part of your family, don't tell them, this is the book that you must read. So sometimes if you go to a news website, they will tell you, these are the 100 books that you should have read during your lifetime. I don't think that's very healthy, because I think always introduce children to books and then they should be able to read whatever they want. The minute you tell a child, this is what you must read, or this book is better than that book, and this is called literary fiction, and therefore it's better than, say, something else which is not literary fiction, I think the child will get bored. B, you're making the child, instead of making the child get interested in reading, the child is probably going to start hating reading. And C, of course, there are books that are badly written, but it's for the child to discover. And this is not just about children. I think this is also about adults, because as a part of my job, what I also do is I read a lot of bad books. So I review for the newspaper. I review books for the newspaper. So in the Hindu, we have something called the Sunday magazine, which comes on Sundays. And a part of that is the section called literary review. So we get books and then we have to review those books. Now, I don't get to choose what I review. I'm given, the book's editor decides what I get to review and what I don't. But as a result of that, I have read several good books, but I've also read some, not very good books. But I think it's important to read both, because only if you read great books, good books, average books, and bad books, will you be able to differentiate what's good writing, what's not, what could have been changed and what not. So I don't think you should feel obliged to read, don't ever do that. If you pick up a book and you feel, oh, this is not so interesting, maybe it's a little bit boring for me, everybody seems to be saying great things about this book, but I don't really like it, that's fine. Everyone is allowed to have a view about a book. just pick up some other book and start reading that book. It doesn't matter what you read, but just keep reading. Now, this lecture, or rather this talk, is of course organized by your library, and from what I understand, and it's about how to get younger people to read. Now, of course, today this is a big challenge, especially because I would say a large part because of the pandemic. All of you may have not been able to attend college for months on end, and so you all would have had online classes. And then you may have had assignments, or as school children would have had homework, all of it online. And then, of course, the horrible part, I would say, it's pretty sad, is that children then again turn to their laptops or to their phones for entertainment also. So they play video games on their computers or their phones, or they watch movies on their laptops or on their parents' laptops, or they're just watching nursery rhymes. I mean, from the youngest kids, I mean, like 2 years old onwards, you see everybody hooked to a screen. And although this has been the case for a while now, I think the pandemic has made it worse because of the inability to step out and actually have a life outside of one's own home. So, at a time like this, it becomes even more crucial to talk about why reading is important. And I know a lot of people my age as well, not just people who are your age or people who are younger, but even people my age who have said, oh, I'm not able to read, I'm not able to focus, or I'm not able to concentrate, and reading a book seems like a pretty arduous task. So I am going to just focus on a few things that I think are beneficial from reading, and then I'm going to go on to talking about how to solve this problem, like how to solve this problem of not being able to concentrate or not being able to focus. And these are little hacks that I have tried myself, so I can assure you that it works. So, firstly, of course, as I said, when I was referring to my grandfather, it's just about knowledge, right? And books help you improve your vocabulary. They help you communicate better. They help you become articulate, to be eloquent, to be able to articulate your ideas clearly to another person. And I think whichever job you're in, it doesn't matter whether you're in IT, or whether you get into the arts, or whether you're a banker. But communication skills are something that are important in every job. Everyone appreciates good communicators. And I think reading books, it really helps you become a good communicator, because books help you understand other people, it helps you understand situations, it helps you become empathetic, put yourself in other people's shoes, but also because you learn so many different words, so many ways of constructing sentences, so many beautiful ways of putting words together, that you yourself will after some time start maybe talking like that. And every time I read a book, what I do, have my bookshelf next to me, but what I do is I always, even now I do that. I used to do that as a child, but I do it even now. I always not underline, but I write down the words that I have not come across before, and then I try to use them in a different context. So I think that has helped me as a writer and as a communicator. And I would suggest that you do the same, only because, as I said, it's beneficial in any job. So that's one, it gives you confidence. It makes you knowledgeable about the world around you. And by knowledgeable, what I also mean is, a lot of people travel around the world, they learn about different cultures, they go to new places. So you go on a holiday and you realize, oh, the people here are different, or their languages are different, their cultures are different, their mannerisms are different. But these are not things that you have to necessarily learn from just traveling. And not everyone can afford to travel, but everyone can afford to read. And when you read, you are automatically transported into a different world. Okay. And it's beautiful to be in that kind of a world and to learn so much about another culture, about another person, about other characters, and about other different political situations. So recently, for instance, I was very excited because I read this book. I don't know if it's a quite like a large book, but it's called Wild Swans, and it's basically it says the three daughters of China. Now, somebody suggested this book to me, and I because of the nature of my job, I was quite curious about China. Everyone's talking about China these days. China is at our border, they're threatening us, everyone's boycotting Chinese goods and so on. But how much do we really know about China? How much have we, even interacted with the Chinese, and how much do we really know about their culture or their history? And it's always important to know your neighbors, right? So I found this book really interesting because it's not one of those dry political books that only talks about the history of China. But what it does is this woman, who's the author, she talks about her grandmother's period, her mother's period, and her life in China. And through the story of her family, she traces the history of China. So it's basically a history of China over the past 2 centuries, but told through a very personal outlook. So that way you get to learn a lot about Chinese history as well as politics, but you also get to know a lot about the way women were treated, about social mores, or about how families are in China, what's considered okay, what's not considered okay, which again differs from culture to culture. So this kind of knowledge is something that you can acquire, of course, in other ways. You can watch a film maybe which is very well appreciated, and critiques have loved the film, and so you go and learn about China through that film. But then I feel through books, it is a completely different experience altogether, because you can reread portions, you can mark out portions, you can talk excitedly about what you have learned to other people. And so it's just about how much you can learn just by sitting in one place. And I think that is fantastic. So, of course, the first thing I would say is books give you knowledge. The second thing I would say is it makes you analytical, okay? And when I say analytical, when you read different books, you analyze them, right? Like, what is the plot point? How is the storyline been written? Or how is the character arc? Is there a lot that we know about this character? Is there something that the author could have added about this character? And I think this is important because it can also be a very fun exercise. And to give you an example, if you read a lot of mystery books, at some point you don't realize it, but over time you start wondering yourself, when you're about 50 to 100 pages into, say, a 300-page book, you start wondering, oh, who is the killer? I think it's this guy. And then you start connecting all the dots, and then you realize that sometimes you even find out who the killer is before it's revealed to you in the end. Sometimes the author is so clever that they may put little clues here and there that you may not be able to detect immediately, but you do find out later, and then you go back and you think, oh yes, okay, I missed that bit, or I missed this bit. So it sort of becomes like a puzzle. So I think in that way, books make you analytical because they help you think in different ways, and they help you sort of analyze how characters have grown or they have not grown, or how they have changed according to the circumstances. And analytical skills, again, just as communicative skills are, they are always important in any job. I think having an analytical mind is something that's always well appreciated. The next thing that I'm going to talk about is mental stimulation. So I feel we live in a world where all of us are very distracted, and also where everyone is very stressed because you're constantly doing different things, and there's just so much pressure, whether it's from your job or whether it's from your college or whether it's from your family life. And I feel books make you sort of calm and peaceful, but also, more importantly, studies have shown that if you keep reading, you can avoid, getting in your old age. You guys are very young, so, and I mean, of course, I'm maybe a decade older than you, but it's also important to keep reading so that your mind stays active. And as you grow older, that becomes even more important. When you see older people talk about things like Alzheimer's or dementia, there are different ways in which doctors say you can deal with these things. You either play with puzzles, or you do crosswords, or you play games. But books that way always keep your mind active. And I'm not talking about old people to say, oh, when you reach a certain age, that's when you should read books. No, keep reading throughout, because then your mind always stays active. And for your mind to be active, that is very crucial. Then, of course, I was talking about stress. So I think books also kind of help you reduce stress levels, because you get transported to a different world, and then you kind of get sucked into that world, and so you're not really worrying about your everyday problems. When I speak about focus and concentration, I feel we live in a very distracted world today, right? So all of us are there are so many different ways in which we entertain ourselves. So we watch Netflix, we watch Amazon, we watch movies on Amazon Prime, we're binge watching shows. But apart from that, there's also social media, which is really the biggest distraction. And there's WhatsApp. So every time you feel a little guilty about not reading for some time, and then you pick up a book and you tell yourself, okay, you know what, I am going to read 50 pages in the next few hours, come what may. And then your phone rings, so you take it, and then there's a notification, so you want to know who's liked some picture, who's commented on something. So then again, you go back to Instagram and you're like checking out photos, or you're going to Facebook and you're replying to comments, or you're going to Twitter and you're getting angry about something. So you are immediately distracted, and then you get sucked into that social media world, because it's very easy to get sucked into that social media world. But as a result of that, what has happened is our concentration levels have reduced so drastically over time. Studies show that right now we have the attention spans of goldfish. And that's actually really worrying, because in the past, I think I read this study which was done in the US about how students from the age of 18 to 25 used to spend so many hours on books at that age in about a decade ago. But now it's come down by half, because most of them say that they instead spend that time on social media. So I think the thing about social media is it also has a very insidious negative impact on us, right? When you're in it, you're looking for validation on social media, you get it immediately, and then you feel happy. But you don't realize that over time, you keep looking for validation, or you keep wondering what's new out there. You feel FOMO, as you guys call it, and you lose focus and concentration on things that are actually important. And so when people are given a book and they're expected to read that book, it takes them a really long time, much longer than it would have taken them many years ago, because their concentration levels have come down so much. So I feel it's very important to try and read for, say, start maybe with like 15, 20 minutes in the morning or at night before you go to sleep. And this is something that I went through the same thing at some point, even though I read quite a lot, A, because of my job, and B, also because I like reading. But I realized that even my attention span was decreasing. I was getting very easily distracted. So at some point, I started keeping my phone away in a different room. And then I used to just take a book and then read, say, for about half an hour. Over time, I realized that the more and more I did this, and the more control I had over myself, I realized that I went back to reading just as I used to read. And so now it doesn't really matter. I can read even like half a book at a go, or if the book is small, one book over a night. But I think you have to make sure that your phones are away. You have to make sure that your laptop is away, and that there is no show that is going to sort of pull you into that world. And just tell yourself, is this book interesting? Let me read it. And as I said earlier, don't try to pick up the most boring book and then try to read it and wonder why your concentration levels have gone down. Try out different books, and then if you think that this book is really interesting, so maybe something like, as I said, a mystery novel, if it turns out to be really nice, then you'll automatically just read more, and then you don't have to be compelled into doing it. So that's focus and concentration. The next point is, of course, it helps you develop your writing skills. Now, like communication, as I mentioned earlier, or like analytical skills, which I again mentioned earlier, writing skills are also, I feel, important in a lot of jobs. Now, I am obviously going to say that as a person who writes myself and who is in a field that requires good writing skills. But I think it's something that can help you at any point of time, right? You can always sit down for a part of the day, try writing a poem, try writing a paragraph, or try thinking about a character and sort of putting yourself in that character's shoes and wondering what that character would do if they were in this situation. Try to use the words that you have learned in books in different situations. And something that I am quite particular about is, the younger generation really use a lot of bad English in WhatsApp messages. So, like you say you instead of YOU. I don't know why. Like it takes 2 seconds to literally type those two extra letters, but that's how we all type. And I am very particular even about the way I type on WhatsApp. I don't know if that makes me an old person or uncool, but I still am, because I feel if you make it a habit to always write well with the correct punctuation, with the correct grammar, then it doesn't become difficult for you to do it in circumstances where you actually need to do it. So what I mean to say is, if you're writing an exam, and obviously you have to write good English in that exam, or whatever, good French, or whatever subject that you're learning, it's important for you to have a command over that language. And that command over the language is not going to come and go. It's not going to just come whenever you want it, and then the rest of the time you treat the language with some sort of contempt and disdain and kind of butcher it. No. If you're consistent with it, then I think it automatically makes you better at that language. And with writing skills, the minute you see the way certain writers write, you start becoming really empathetic. And I think empathy is something that's severely lacking these days, because everyone is, always outraging about something, but always try to figure out what's it like to be in someone else's shoes. What's it like to be in that circumstance? Do you think I would have reacted similarly? Would I have done something different? Does this person have a right to be angry about this, or is this person being quite unreasonable? So I think by being introduced to different characters in books, you also get introduced to different situations that you yourself have not been in. And you also get introduced to circumstances that you may never actually be in, but it helps you understand why certain people in those circumstances reacted the way they did. Again, bringing in my job into this, I've realized that is something that's very important for me. Of course, a lot of my time goes in reading really depressing stuff. The news is often depressing. But it's always important to be empathetic. And I think empathy is a very, very large part of journalism. You have to understand where the other person is coming from. And for that, keep reading. So I think for better writing skills, I think books are obviously the best things. Now, also look at it this way, okay? Like a painter, or a carpenter, they will, or even say a makeup artist, they're always going to follow other painters and carpenters and makeup artists to better their art. And it's the same with writers. It's the same with, poets. They're all going to follow the works of other poets, of other writers. They're going to get inspired by them, and then they may start writing, or they, might think that, oh, if this person can do it, then so can I. But the wonderful thing about reading is that it's not something that only writers should do, or poets should do. Everybody can, because everybody has something to take away from it. And why is that? Why am I saying everybody has something to take away from it? That's because there are books of all kinds, right? Now, if you want to read something about, say, mental health issues, about depression, there are books to help you with that. If you want to read about Korea, because let's assume that some of you watch K-drama and you're BTS fans, and now you're interested in Korea, you can always read a book about Korea, a fictional story that's set in Korea, or a non-fictional story that tells you about the relationship between North Korea and South Korea. So for that, you will find any number of books. If you are interested in politics, and say you're interested today in India-US relations, and you want to know a little bit more about that, or you want to know a little bit more about Biden and Trump and why Republicans are different from Democrats, then again, turn to books, because there are so many books that have been written about US politics. There have been so many books that have spoken about why, say, the economic and social ideas and policies of one section of people is so different from the other. And I think only by reading more and more and more, can you form your own opinion. Now, I think books are important for that, not WhatsApp messages. And I feel very strongly about this, and that's why I keep saying it. I feel a lot of people have now substituted books and good articles and journalism with WhatsApp, right? So you just believe whatever comes to you on WhatsApp, and then you kind of that becomes fact. And at some point, I think the problem with WhatsApp is there's no sort of line dividing fiction and fact. Anything that's made up becomes fact, and then it goes viral. But if you try and read a book, and if you've read a lot, then you start to question what comes to you even on social media, and you think, hey, wait, that doesn't sound right. Is this person correct? Then you go and fact check it, and you realize it's rubbish. So that is very important. Only through books can you understand what information is correct and what information is not correct. And for you to know that is extremely important in an age like this, where fake news is so rampant, because only by knowing what's correct and what's not, can you come up with your own opinions, and can you back those opinions with facts, and can you make any sort of judgment on anything that's going on. And then again, if you're say someone who likes reading self-help groups, or if you're someone who wants to read a book about an inspiring person, so there are always a number of books that have been written, say Mandela, right? And if you're inspired by Mandela, or if you're inspired by Gandhi, then you will want to read about that person's life. So there are books for that also. So the wonderful thing about books is that it's there's something for everybody. So that's why I said in the beginning of this talk, don't get bullied into thinking this is a better book, or that's a better book, this is a better genre, that's a better genre. There'll always be people saying things like that. But if you're a science fiction fan, read science fiction books. If you're someone who likes comics, read comics, but just keep reading. Now at this point, I actually want to read out a few parts of something that I want to read out a few parts of a lecture that Neil Gaiman, the writer, wrote during in a piece in The Guardian about fiction. And I really like some of those passages. So he talks about fiction. So I just wanted to read out a couple of paras from that essay because I thought it was an extraordinary essay. So he says, fiction, if you're a fan of fiction, it has two uses. Firstly, it's a gateway drug to reading. The drive to know what happens next, to want to turn the page, the need to keep going, even if it's hard, because someone's in trouble and you have to know how it's all going to end. That's a very real drive. And it forces you to learn new words, to think new thoughts, to keep going, to discover that reading per se is pleasurable. Once you learn that, you're on the road to reading everything. And reading is key. There were noises made briefly a few years ago about the idea that we were living in a post-literate world in which the ability to make sense out of written words was somehow redundant. But those days are gone. Words are more important than they ever were. We navigate the world with words, and as the world slips into the web, we need to follow to communicate and to comprehend what we are reading. People who cannot understand each other, cannot exchange ideas, cannot communicate, and translation programs can only go that far. The simplest way to make sure that we raise literate children is to teach them to read and to show them that reading is a pleasurable activity. And that means, at its simplest, finding books that they enjoy, giving them access to those books, and letting them read them. So that he says is the first use of fiction, right? So that the second thing about fiction he says is it builds empathy, which is what I was talking about earlier. When you watch TV or see a film, you're looking at things happening to other people. Prose fiction is something you build up from 26 letters and a handful of punctuation marks. And you alone, using your own imagination, create a world and people and look out through other eyes. You get to feel things, visit places and worlds you would never otherwise know. You learn that everyone else out there is me as well. You're being someone else, and when you return to your own world, you're going to be slightly changed. Now, I really like what he says about you realizing through a book that that person is also me. And I've often felt that through books. Sometimes you're going through something and you don't really realize that you feel, oh, I'm quite alone in this. I feel this emotion and I feel I'm quite alone. I don't think everyone else around me seems happy. Nobody else seems to be going through this. And then suddenly you pick up a book and then you just come across a character who turns out to be quite similar to you or is going through something that's quite similar to you. And because of the manner in which the writer writes that, you realize, oh, there are other people over there. And so you feel like it's a community. There are people in the world who are feeling the exact same things as you do. So that is, again, a huge advantage of fiction. The other thing that he mentioned, which I really liked, is pleasure. I think books are fantastic because it's free entertainment. It gives you, it gives you a shot of happiness. You know, you don't pay for it. Of course, you pay for a book, but you can always be part of a library, as you guys are if you're part of a college. You know, you just pay a small fee, and then you get to read so much with that little amount of money, and you get so much pleasure and joy out of it. So much more than, say, going to a movie and spending a lot of money on popcorn and Coke and watching a movie and coming back home. That, of course, is equally important, but I'm saying this is something that is almost free, and it's endless. Like, you can keep reading, you can keep discovering new books, and you'll never run out. So that pleasure is something that's very important. And reading for pleasure, I think, has become another thing where I don't think a lot of people do that a lot these days, because people who have very hectic jobs always say, oh, I don't have time to read. But that's like saying, I don't have time to have fun. And if you don't have time to read, or if you don't have time to have fun, then you're leading a pretty sad life. And it's a very one directional kind of existence. So however hectic your job is, and trust me, like, my job is super hectic, so I finish work only at 12 at night. But when I finish work, I always try to sit up for at least half an hour, 45 minutes, and read a little before I go to sleep. And so I think at any point, whether you're in a train traveling somewhere, or whether you're going to office, if someone else is driving you, oh, okay, sorry, never read in a car, but what I mean is in a plane or in an aircraft, or you know, you're sitting at a station, or in the middle of the night you're sitting in bed, always snatch those little moments to, you know, take out a book and read. The other thing about reading is, you don't always have to read new books. You know, you don't have to feel, oh, everyone's talking about this book, so I have to read it. Because if you feel like you really like a book, you can keep reading that book. It's the same with films, right? We have certain films that we really like. And sometimes when we're feeling low, or, you know, we're feeling kind of, we've not had the best day, then you go back to that film and watch that film again. And there are some films that we have watched again and again and again. And that's fine. Rereading books is also an art, that, you know, that the benefits of which cannot be stressed enough. And every time you read a book, actually, you realize that you may have missed something, that it has something new for you. And so when you discover that, you look at characters, and you look at situations, and you look at the book itself from a new angle. So rereading is, again, something that you can do. If you really liked something, then please just go back to it and read it. It doesn't matter that you're not catching up with the rest of the world. You're not reading what everybody else is reading. And I'm going to make a bit of an admission over here. So when during the pandemic, I'm sure at some point you all may have felt a little frustrated, you know, when is this ever going to end? You know, is this pandemic ever going to end? And during those times, I discovered, while cleaning my house, I discovered some of the books that I used to read when I was about 12 or 13. And I actually sat down and read some of them again, and they just brought me so much happiness, because I suddenly remembered my childhood. I suddenly remembered where I was reading that book, at what point. And also, I realized what I really liked about that book. And then, of course, saw the book in new light again. So rereading books is also fine, but just read. And lastly, of course, I think reading books is like a peaceful activity, because it's just you with yourself and your book. The rest of the world doesn't really affect you. You can read anywhere, as opposed to watching a film or playing a video game, where, you know, you have to sit somewhere and do that. With a book, you can sit on your pavement, you can sit in your house, you can sit in an airport, you can sit anywhere. And if you have a Kindle or a book, then just carry it with you everywhere and read. So this is, yeah, pretty much what I wanted to talk to you guys about. I hope this was pretty helpful. But now that I have spoken for over 45 minutes, I was just wondering, whether from now we could have a more sort of communicative interaction. So if you guys have any questions or you have any personal things that you'd like to speak to me about, maybe this is the time. Also, I'd like to know what each of you is reading and why you like reading what you're reading. So why don't we start with that? Why don't you tell me what you're reading and why you are reading that book? Anybody? Otherwise, I'm just going to take out names and then you'll have to sort of, okay, so why don't you unmute yourselves instead of messaging? Someone has said, Gayatri Ganesh says, I prefer reading romance novels. Gayatri, can you unmute yourself and tell me why you like romance novels and what you're reading right now?
Hi. So like no specific reasons why I love romance. Like it's a feel good kind of book. So that is the reason I prefer romance. And I currently finished reading It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover.
Okay.
So
you like it because it's a feel good thing, right? So it just makes you feel all like happy and
yeah,
feel good about romance. Okay, that's nice. Do you always read romance novels or do you read other kinds of genres also? Gayatri? Okay, so somebody else says, oh, okay, someone says, I like fantasy and fiction books. Sorry, I can't unmute because of all the disturbing noise. Oh, okay, so what kind of fantasy do you like? Can you also type out there? Maybe what fantasy and fiction you enjoy, and then we can. Oh, this is quite a pity that there's background noise, and so you all can't participate. That would have been a lot nicer if we were in an actual classroom. Yeah?
My name is Uday Banu.
Yes?
Actually, I like to read more books, and it's friend of us. By reading these books, I have achieved something big. I thought it because I have got published my poems and stories in books nowadays on the behalf of the college friends.
Oh, wonderful. That's lovely. Congratulations.
I didn't accept first of all because the teachers motivated me and they pushed me actually. But I had a talent about this before the 5 years or 6 years, but I didn't showcase it anywhere. But the teachers pushed me and my parents supported it, so I achieved it.
Wonderful. That's fantastic. Okay. So somebody here has said, I usually like listening to stories, but as you said, the importance of reading, I'll start reading from now onwards. Okay, so I just want to respond to that. See, by reading, there are sometimes when you don't actually feel like picking up a book or a Kindle and reading, right? You want to listen to stories. And I think the art of listening to stories is also something that's beautiful. I mean, when we were all children, our mothers or grandmothers, at least my mother, every time I used to go to bed, she used to come and sit by my side and read out, she used to tell me stories. So these were the stuff like Hansel and Gretel and Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, or they would also be stories from the Panchatantra and from the Amar Chitra Kathas. And listening to those stories, I still remember those nights very well. And I think listening is also a way in which you kind of imbibe what you have learned. So even if you're not reading a story, the wonderful thing about nowadays is that there are audiobooks, there are podcasts, right? So if there are long form magazine pieces, you will find an audio version of it anywhere, okay? And you can always go and listen to that instead of reading it if you don't feel particularly like you want to listen to something. So that will feel like someone telling you a story, and that's fine too, as far as it's like an audio version of a book. So that's okay. Someone else has said, I'm reading Angels and Demons by Dan Brown. I chose this book because I'm not a fan of science fiction, but wanted to explore the genre. This is Priyadarshini. Oh, that's nice, Priyadarshini. I had a crazy Dan Brown phase in my, I think about 15 years ago, actually. So I read a lot of Dan Brown books and they can be pretty addictive. yeah, I hope you like the book. Even I'm not a fan of science fiction, by the way, so I kind of actively avoid that genre. But I know a lot of people who really like science fiction, but yeah, each to his own. And then Siddhi says, I prefer reading nonfiction and fiction with romance. Okay, I find this class likes romance a lot. I would ask you more questions if I was there, but that's nice to know that you all like romance. I wonder if all of you are Georgette Hare fans. Nonfiction is great to read. I read quite a bit of nonfiction, but I actually nowadays I read less of it because I feel news itself is some kind of nonfiction. I'm constantly hearing depressing things, so I don't feel like going back and reading more nonfiction. So I like to kind of read fiction because it's a different world altogether. And then someone says Harry Potter. This is Sejal. She says Harry Potter or science fiction and horror novels as well. Harry Potter, of course, is an all-time favorite, and I think one can never get tired of it. Everyone will have a Harry Potter story about the first time they discovered it, how they liked it, who their favorite characters are. You're a fan of science fiction. That's great. You should give some suggestions on the group. And horror novels. Oh, I actually haven't read horror in a really long time, Sejal. So please do write what horror novels you like. I'm sure that will be beneficial for the class. And it'll also, I think, Manat also says she likes horror books. So both of you can suggest horror books to everybody. Devadarshini says she likes Private by James Pattinson. I think this is a pretty well-known book. I'm not surprised that you like it. Gayatri says, I'm sorry. Why are you sorry? Oh, because you couldn't respond to me back then. That's fine. I realize there's a lot of background noise. Aisha says, as a kid, I was really into reading, extremely obsessed with books, but as I grew up, I had to focus on studies, eventually lost touch with reading. Now I've been trying to start reading, but it feels like a task. Aisha, just remember you're not the only one because everybody feels like this. The minute you grow up, you realize you don't have time like you did when you were a child. And so you do lose touch. I have lost touch with reading. I don't read as much as I used to. I make a conscious effort to read as much, but it's impossible given the kind of pressure that I have in my job. But don't think of it as a task. Just as I said, read something which is light, read something which is easy. Don't pick up something which is very, which looks very daunting, because the minute you pick up something that's very intimidating, then you put it down and you kind of give up immediately. Pick up something maybe that's a thin book which is well received. Read a few reviews to see which books are, which books people are suggesting, and then try reading that and then see. Because if you feel that something is very intimidating, like Wild Swans for me was very intimidating because look at this book, it's huge. But at other times, I read books that are this thin. Okay. And so it really depends on how you feel at a particular point, and don't pressure yourself to read something, but pick up something that grabs you immediately, and then later you will find it easier to read more books. Don't think of it as a task, but also remember everyone goes through this. Lochana says, I prefer reading mystery, mythology, and psychological thrillers. Oh, that's lovely. I love mysteries too. I also quite like mythology and psychological thrillers. Oh, wow. Okay. I haven't read any psychological thrillers. Guys, maybe while you're typing, also maybe name a book or two so that I can read those out and everyone can benefit from it. Even I can benefit from it. Like, I don't read psychological thrillers, I don't read horror books. So I'd love to know your suggestions. Haripriya says, I like reading books because it keeps me company. Yes, absolutely. And soothes me when I'm down. I agree with you, Haripriya. Books are a constant source of company. They don't stress you. They are friends who are always there by your side, literally. Siddhi says, I have started reading Amish. Oh, yeah, of course. Amish is very popular. Pooja says, I like reading mystery and fantasy. So mystery again seems to be quite a popular choice here. Devadashini says, I'm currently reading Welcome Home by Najwa Zebian. It's about self-love and accepting yourself the way you are and building a home for yourself within you. Wow, that sounds lovely. I think these self-love books are also important because I feel at a time like this, a lot of people require that they need to know how to accept themselves. You might be different in some ways, but that's fine. But it's always helpful to read a book, as I said earlier, because someone might be feeling the same way that you do, and then you realize you're not alone. and building a home for yourself within you. I love that, by the way. That's a beautiful sentence. Devadashni, you should write. Annapurni says, I've read fiction till now, and the genre usually depends on my mood, but it's mostly mystery or romantic novels. That's nice, guys. I feel like I haven't read romantic novels in years. So I love the fact that this class loves romance so much. Pratisha says, I prefer reading crime novels like Agatha Christie. Oh, Agatha Christie is an all-time favorite. I think I have all her books. Which ones do you like? Of course, there are some that are very, very popular, like Mousetrap or Murder on the Orient Express, When There Were None. So yeah, I don't know which ones you like, but please do suggest books over here. Sandhya says, I like science fiction a lot, like Fallen Odyssey, the Bellandria Tarot, etc. Wow, Sandhya, that sounds pretty. I find a lot of you like science fiction. I'm quite curious about that. That's nice. Manit says, I'm reading Misery from Stephen King because I love horror novels. It's full of thrill and becomes more fun when you read during night times. Yes, Manit, you're brave. I'm not someone who's very brave, by the way. I used to love horror films. And over time, for some reason, I've become a little bit more scared. And at night, when I go to sleep, I realize I don't sleep as well if I watch horror films. So I'm not sure if this is my cup of tea. Then Stephen King again is back. You can check out his novels, they're amazing. Of course, I've read Stephen King. I've been reading this book named Awaken the Giant Within by Anthony Robbins. I sometimes relate to the topics as it talks about our emotional and mental issues. And sometimes it's really helpful and I'm enjoying it a lot. This Ria says, I'm glad, Ria. I think it's important to read books about mental health issues also if you're going through something. I'm glad that you're also enjoying it and it's not just about learning something. Bhuvaneshwari says, I read about subconscious mind. Wow, what is that, Bhuvaneshwari? Is it a psychology book? Sounds very Freudian. Okay, so I don't know if those are the end of the messages, but those are thank you guys. That's a lot of people who have told me what they like to read. So from what I can figure out, a lot of you like romance, mystery, and science fiction. But I would suggest you do something. So even if if I wrap up soon, I think what you all should do is maybe exchange, each of you, please do this and I will keep in touch with your teacher and try and figure out that you're actually doing it. But on a piece of paper, write down what's the best book you've ever read, why you like it, and then tell everybody about it. And so when you do that, everybody will discover a book in the process. Now, this is something that I actually do often with my friends, my school and college friends. Every now and then I reach out to them and I ask them, what are you guys reading? And then they tell me, and they also tell me why they really liked it. And then I discover books that way. So I think that's a great way. And the reason I'm saying that is also because a lot of you seem to have similar tastes. So I think you might enjoy that kind of suggestions and recommendations. And there's another message here. Kadambari, what a lovely name. Kadambari says, I love reading the trivial comedy, The Importance of Being Honest. Of course, Importance of Being Honest. I don't know if you were all in school, but I was in an ICSE school, and in ICSE, Importance of Being Honest was one of the books we had to read. I'd love to read it again because I actually don't remember much of it. I read this book a month ago. It was full of scintillating wit. I completed this book in a matter of 2 to 3 hours. Wow. I've highlighted a few lines from the book where Wilde has achieved real artistic harmony and aestheticism. I'm sick to death of cleverness. Everybody is clever nowadays. You can't go anywhere without meeting clever people. The thing has become an absolute public nuisance. I wish to goodness we had a few fools left. Yeah, that's true. I love the epic dramatic comedy and the conversation between Jack and Algie. That's great. I'm glad, Kadambari. I'm glad you mentioned it because The Importance of Being Honest has been in my bookshelf for a very long time, since my school days. I've never revisited the book, but now I do want to. That's a great quote. Lochana, The Diary on the Fifth Floor by Raisha Lalwani, an interesting thriller novel with psychology as well. Wow, nice suggestions. I haven't actually learned about a lot of these books. Also, this feedback form that keeps coming back, is that for you guys or is that for me? I'm guessing it's for you, right?
Yes, ma'am. It's for the students to fill in the session.
Okay, yeah, cool. Anyway, do you have so apart from the books that we're all suggesting and the different kinds of genres that we're thinking, do you have any specific questions about anything I said? Is there something that you'd like to ask? You can always type your questions over here in chat. And please remember one thing, you can ask anything you want. Please don't worry about, oh, is it okay to ask this, or am I sounding? How to get over our reading slump. Okay. Yeah, Gayatri, this is seriously the biggest problem I think everybody's facing. Everyone has a reading slump. Okay, I have had stages of reading slumps, and I think each time I've dealt with it in a different way. um Sometimes if you're in a slump, it's okay, just don't pick up a book, doesn't matter, just do other things. Like if you feel, oh, I'd rather be outside, I want to go to the beach, or I want to go and see a film in a theater. Okay, actually don't go to the theater, it's dangerous, but like watch a film at home or whatever. But it's okay to do all of that also, you don't have to force yourself to read. But what I would suggest is pick up a book that you have already read and that you like. Like I think you had mentioned earlier what you like. You can always read passages, you don't have to read an entire book. Okay, so sometimes what I do is I pick up books that I really liked, but I remember certain chapters or certain passages in the book that I really like, and so I go back and read those. So you can get over your reading slump in several ways. One, you can just pick out, say, a small poem or a small passage from a book that you've already read, or pick up some sort of murder novel that you have not read, but that's kind of, really trending and everyone's talking about it. And try reading it. And then, if don't force yourself, as I said, try to read maybe 10 pages. And then when you've read 10 pages, you feel, okay, I have achieved something. Then the next day you read 10 more pages. You don't have to set yourself a deadline. Don't tell yourself, I have to finish this book in one day, because 5 years ago, I used to be able to finish a book in a day. Don't put that kind of pressure on yourself. Just take it slowly. And if you are still going through a slump, that's okay, because everyone comes out of that slump. But I would say just read a little bit every day. But very importantly, keep your phone away, keep your laptop away, and make sure you're not next to a TV. And make sure you're in a quiet place, where there's not much noise and all of that. So it should just be you and the book. And if you have to absolutely check a message or make a call or do something like that, do that a little later. These things can wait, it doesn't matter. But just be with your book and try to focus. The other thing I would also suggest, and this is something that I feel is important, I said, some point during the talk, I had said books are also a form of tranquility. I mean, they're a form of meditation. They make you feel peaceful and tranquil. But sometimes actually do exercise or meditation or yoga or any of these things, because if you feel like your concentration is wavering, or if you feel you're not able to focus on something, these are other ways of improving your concentration. So I'm not going to say books are the only way. In fact, in order to read books itself, in order to improve your comprehension, you need these other tactics. So always lead a good healthy lifestyle, but make exercise, yoga, meditation, all these may be a part of your lifestyle, and then you can try and figure out how to get better at your books. Can you prefer a book for mythological? Okay, by the way, I'm going to be a little bit biased here. So my to-be husband is actually a writer of mythology. His name is Aditya Iyengar. So I'm obviously going to say his books are fantastic. But apart from him, he's written, if you're interested, like he imagines the Mahabharata. So he's written this book called Bhumika, where he writes about Sita, and it's a short book, but it's all about Sita and how she imagines what the story could have been like from Sita's perspective. So that's, I thought, a nice way of approaching the Ramayana. But there are also other mythological authors. There's Iravati Carve, who's of course a fabulous writer, but that's from many years ago. I think that would be a little bit more dense. Who else? Even Palaces of Illusions. Yeah, absolutely, Lochna. Palace of Illusions is a good book. Chitra is a good writer, so I would suggest you pick up any of Chitra's books. She's written that wonderful book on Draupadi, which is also something that I think everybody loves. So that's a good suggestion, by the way. Can you prefer a book for good novel, ma'am? Sorry, do you mean you want a recommendation on a good novel? I didn't understand the question, sorry. Okay, I'm just going to suggest some good novels. Well, okay, but I also want to say here that what I might love, you might not love. So don't worry if you think, oh, she suggested it, so I have to read it or something. No such thing. Well, actually, one of the nicest novels that I read recently, the last novel that I read before giving this talk, is one called A Passage North. It's by this Sri Lankan writer. It's called A Passage North, and it was shortlisted for the Booker Prize this year. It's a fabulous book. It's quite short. It's quite small. It's only about 170 to 200 pages. It talks about this guy who goes back to Sri Lanka after the war, and then someone who used to work at his house passes away, and then and that woman has lived through the war. So he kind of looks at post-war Sri Lanka, but it's a fictionalized version. It's a fabulous book. So I would suggest A Passage North. Also, A Passage North is a beautifully written book. It's got really amazing language. He chooses the exact words for that context, and I think that is truly extraordinary. So I think that is one of my favorite books. The other one I like is Kamala Shamsi. I'm looking for her books. Just one second. There is this book called Home Fire. Home Fire. This is also a book that I keep recommending to people. It's a fabulous book. So basically, this book is about, it's about these two women who are in London, and then one of them, her brother gets accused of being a terrorist, and so the book kind of goes off into that direction. So Kamala Shamsi is another good book. Then another book two more books that I'm going to recommend, if you'd like. One of them is called The Association of Small Bombs. This is by a guy called Karan Mahajan. This is a book that is set in India, and it's a small bomb goes off in a market in Delhi, okay? And then he goes on to trace the lives of the families who have been affected. And it's quite interesting because it's not about a large terrorist attack. It's a little bomb that kind of cost some people's lives, but it's an extraordinary book. I think this used to be one of the best books of, I think, 2016 or 17. It was on top of every list. So this is a really good book, easy to read also. So if you want to get out of a reading slump, I think Association of Small Bombs is another book. If you like murder and mystery, there's something called The Book of Mirrors. This is by a guy called Io Chirovici. So this is about a psychologist who in 1987 is murdered. And then 25 years later, a literary agent receives a manuscript. So literary agents basically receive manuscripts to figure out what to publish and what to not, right? Like writers send it to them to figure out whether their books can publish it. But that manuscript turns out to be some sort of a confession about this murder that took place many years ago. So it's very interesting. It's called The Book of Mirrors. These are some of the recommendations. There are some books behind me. Don't think I sit like this in the room, by the way. This is because my house was getting flooded during the rain, so I had to take all my books and keep it up there. I was scared that there would be water in my room. Then, of course, there is this is an all-time favorite. Jean Le Carre. I think if you haven't heard of him, guys, please read his books. He's one of the best writers, I would say. And A Legacy of Spies. I don't know if anybody here has heard of it. I would be quite surprised if none of you have heard of it, because he is fabulous. So again, this is something. He's an extraordinary storyteller, very powerful, very thrilling. And it's a very fast-paced novel. So then again, I think if you want something that you want to finish quickly, I think Jean Le Carre Legacy of Spies is something that I would recommend. I don't know if you guys like Sally Rooney, because some of you said you like romance novels. I think Sally Rooney is someone who really captures millennial relationships. So I feel the relationships that people have these days of this generation very different from the kinds of relationships that our parents or our grandparents would have had. And I think Sally Rooney is someone who she's a writer in Ireland, and her novels are based in Ireland. She's Irish, but she really writes about the younger generations, 20 something year olds. And I feel she's amazing at capturing their feelings, their confusions, their anxieties, their hopes, their desires, all of that. So if you haven't heard of Normal People, I would suggest read that. These are all the people who said they like romance. This is not your usual kind of romance, but it's a extraordinary book. It's called Normal People, Sally Rooney. So these are some of my suggestions. I don't want to keep boring you with half my bookshelf, but I hope that is useful. If I find anything else, I will tell you. Yeah, any other questions? I'm trying to see what else I can suggest to you guys. Anyway, yeah. And because I spoke about Aditya, that's Bhumika, and that is a story of Sita. Again, it's a smallish book. These are the kinds of notes that I make in some of my books when I like certain things and I want to mark them. So for anybody who likes mythology, his books, he writes a lot of mythological fiction. So he doesn't write the Ramayana, the Mahabharata itself, but he tries to imagine what happens to those characters after that. Where the Mahabharata ends or where the Ramayana ends, he tries to imagine what happens after that. So, and he takes each character. So one book is about Sita, one book is about Ashwatthama, one book is about the Cholas. So there are different kinds of books, but again, very accessible, very simple, easy to read kind of books. So yes, I think I've suggested something under mythology, something under romance, mystery, and sociological. I would say like both Home Fire and Association of Small Bongs have something to do with like terrorism and jihad and all that, but they're very, very interesting. They also tell you a lot about family life. Anthologies are in trend. I have seen a lot of people being part of anthologies. Is it a scam or an opportunity? What's your take on it? Why do you say it's a scam? And what do you mean by, is it an opportunity? I mean, by anthologies, do you mean like people writing different stories and publishing it together? Because I think it's quite interesting. I think it's nice to have anthologies. I don't think it's a scam. Look, writers also, like other artists, they try to figure out what people like at a particular point of time, right? And then they try to kind of cash in on it and do the same thing. So I think that's pretty normal. I'm not a huge fan of anthologies myself, but if I come across a good one and if something is highly recommended, then I might check it out. Okay, I can hear someone talking. I don't know if that's a question, but can you please type it out because I can't hear you. But Kadambari, can you please elaborate a little bit more? Why do you say it's a scam? I mean, why are you asking me if it's a scam? Okay, while we wait for her to respond to that, anybody else? Okay, let me ask you something. Are you all part of a library apart from your college? Oh, okay. Someone says, a little out of context, but wanted to ask, what is your opinion on a movie recreated from a book? That's a very good question. Not out of context. Well, I think it can be both ways. It can be both a boon and a bane. So for instance, some movies I think have done great justice to the book. I don't know if any of you have seen To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee, which became a movie and which had Gregory Peck in it. To Kill a Mockingbird is a fantastic film. It's such a good film, and I think the filmmakers really did justice to Kill a Mockingbird, the book, which is seen as a classic these days. So I think that's one of the examples of a book that's been sort of made into like a good movie. I think in a way, those kind of movies do help because you want to go back and read the book. Some movies make you want to go back and actually read the book. Some other movies, I think, do great injustice to the book. I feel with Harry Potter, I quite enjoyed the movies. I think some of the movies were very well done and they did it was a good franchise. But I think some other movies, maybe not so much, they don't do as much justice. Again, another movie that I can think of that did great justice to the book was Gone Girl. Have you seen it? It's very it's eerie, it's scary, but it's a really well done movie. I think, yeah, I mean, if it's a good book, people sometimes make movies out of them. There are some writers, though, who only write hoping that their books will be made into movies. So that's another thing that I see these days. Like some people just write books hoping that they'll be made into movies. So it sounds more like a movie script rather than a book. But I think, yeah, I don't see anything wrong with the trend. I just feel it should do justice to the book. So yeah. Fault in Our Stars. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Another good example. And that's not an unrelated question. That's a good question. Please ask me more such questions. I'm happy to answer it. I think anyway, in about 5 minutes, we will have to wrap up. So please do put out anything else that you have to ask me. Can you suggest some good non-fiction books? In what genre? Like, I feel non-fiction is really something that's everyone has very different tastes. Can you tell me like what you like read? What are your interests? I mean, is it politics? Is it diplomacy? Is it war? Is it poverty, famine, climate change? If you give me some idea, then I can message you some suggestions. Politics. Okay, let me see. Lalita says, "Can I leave?" Yeah, sure. Can you please can you suggest some good books to make love reading again? I think some of the books that I suggested should be like sufficient. I'm hoping any of you will pick up one of those books because they have helped me during my reading slumps. So I feel it may do the same for you. Good politics books. Okay, actually, I'm suddenly starting to realize that this is a hard question to answer because again, politics could mean Indian politics, it could be American politics. Okay, anyway, I'm going to suggest 2 books, which I remember from a few years ago. One of them was Milan Vaishnav. So Milan Vaishnav has written about money and muscle in Indian politics. It's called When Crime Pays. So that is, I think, a good book if you want to understand Indian politics. There's also Mary Beard, who's written Women and the Other, or what's it called? Okay, let me just message you that. Then, okay, the one book that I would definitely recommend is it's a book on caste, and that's called Sujata Gidla's Ants Among Elephants. So that would be 1 second. Second, I'm just typing it. Yeah, I think those two. I think it's called When Crime Pays. Sorry. And suppose you're a person who really likes knowing about like seas and hills and the history of our nature and of the Indian subcontinent, then I would also suggest this book called Indica. It's by this man called Pranay Lal, who's also written a book very recently, which again I think will help us understand the pandemic a lot better. So that's you can check him out. If you want to read a very short nonfiction book, it's called Women and Power. It's there on my bookshelf. Oh, I'm very bored. I think these are some of the nonfiction recommendations that I have. To be honest, I think I have a lot more. I'm just not able to think at the top of my head. One sec, I think I missed a question here. Wattpad, Inkit, and other apps also have writers who don't publish it to the world like paperback. Oh, okay. But they do have quality books. I've been mostly reading from Wattpad, and 3/4 have quality books. So really, that's really interesting. I didn't know about these apps. I'm going to take that down. Wattpad. Okay. Thank you for that, by the way. I didn't know that. Do you prefer listening to books? No, I'm not a fan of listening to books. I do. I listen to podcasts very, very rarely. I realize that if someone keeps on talking in the background, I fall asleep. So I'm not someone who's very good with audiobooks. So I prefer reading actually. But I know a lot of people who like audiobooks. So maybe you'll be one of them. I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm sure there are other nonfiction books. I think a lot of the stuff that I've suggested are from like 2017, 18. Let me look. Oh, there is this guy called, oh God, Chinmay Tumbe, I think, who writes really well about migration, but also about pandemics. I think I've got his name a little, I think I've misspelled his name, but I know that he's a fabulous writer. So for anybody who wants to read about pandemics or why we have pandemics, then that is a good book. Then there's also Fear. If you want to read about Trump, there is this book called Fear by Bob Woodward. I don't know if you've heard of Bob Woodward. He's a fabulous journalist. He's an investigative journalist. And he is someone who was known for Watergate. Watergate was this investigation during the time of Richard Nixon, and Bob Woodward was the one who did that investigation. It led to the fall of Richard Nixon. So it's a really good book on Trump. So if you're in case you're interested in Trump, then that's a good book to read. So those are some suggestions of nonfiction from a couple of years, I think. Also, I'm just going to suggest, I'm sending you guys a link which says the best nonfiction books of the decade. I know the person who put this list together. She's my colleague and she's a senior colleague of mine. She's the book's editor. She will have some good recommendations. So maybe you could always. Oh, about anthologies. Yes, Kadambari. How do we find out if the publisher is genuine? I always have a fear of someone stealing my ideas or probably a piece of my writing. Personally, I found it a bit commercial in some cases, or to pay for their writing. I'm not sure if it's legit. Oh, okay. Oh, yeah, that's a problem. Stealing ideas is always the problem. I think when you want to publish something, you always have to give it to a publisher who's well known, like a Juggernaut or a Penguin, Random House, or one of these well-known publications. Some, of course, not to say that some of the smaller publishing houses are not good, because some of them are pretty niche. And so if your story is quite different, the smaller publishing house might be interested, but not the larger ones. You always have to ensure there is a contract. You have to ensure that you get paid well. I'm not sure about these apps that one of your classmates spoke about. I don't know how it works on those apps. But because I'm quite old school, I only know about this old school way of publishing, which is through publishing houses. And over there, you don't have to worry about people cheating you, I think. Yeah. But anthologies, again, if you just send it to somebody who who can be trusted and which is like a trusted publishing house. Do a lot of research if you want to publish something, like find out if someone else you know has published with them, what their experience was like, and then, go on to pitching an idea to them. So that would be my suggestions. So yes. So I don't know if this is all the questions we have, but if we don't have any more, then maybe we can wrap up this session.
Yes, ma'am. Sure.
Okay, so thank you so much for this. It was wonderful. I really wish, though, that I was actually in your class. It would have been a lot better to do this interactive session, but I'm glad you guys messaged me. It's really nice. I really enjoyed it, and a big thank you to the teachers and the staff of the college for inviting me. It was a pleasure, and I hope this was useful to you. If you want to email me and ask me anything, I'm just going to put in my email address here. You can always email me if you want. So that's my email address. I'm so glad that you enjoyed the session, Gayatri. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, ma'am. Thank you so much. It was definitely a very informative session and definitely a kickstarter for our students to start reading and inculcate their reading habits. And I now request all these girls to please fill their feedback form that is being posted in the chat box. And I feel really honored to propose the word of thanks on behalf of Sri Shankarlal Sandabai Shashan Jain College for Women. On this special occasion, we are very much thankful to our Chief Guest, Ms. Radhika Sankhanam, for sparing her valuable time with us and for motivating our students with her treasurable information. Next, I would like to express our gratitude to our management, Secretary Sir, Associate Secretary Sir, Principal Ma'am, Vice Principal Ma'am, and our faculty teachers, and last but not the least, our dearest students. So once again, we thank you all. Stay home, stay safe, and have a really good read. Thank you for this.
I would just like to again thank Sajita from Sashan Jain College. Thank you, Sajita, for keeping in touch and for reaching out to me. And also, all of you, please stay safe, be masked, maintain social distancing, and get vaccinated. And keep reading. Bye.
Bye, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am.
Girls, please fill the feedback form that's been posted in the chat box. It's a reminder. Please do fill it.